Hello and welcome to the Storage Syndicate Spotlight. It is Wednesday night, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. I am fired up today, Steve. You are in the office still. I just noticed that. Like, I don't know what the heck you're doing in the office. You got the Monopoly sign over your shoulder. You doing some late night work today or what?
Yeah, I did, man. I'm taking up a new role. I'm learning, so I hung out for an extra hour, did some personal learning time, messing around with Google Maps.
We're going to do some more personal learning tonight. For those of you that missed it, the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce was at our CubeSmart location in San Antonio today. We opened that store officially, the doors opened a month and a half, 2 months ago, but we had a grand opening celebration today. So Joe Evangelisti and Brian Brogan were down in San Antonio. They are mid-flight right now, so my man Steve gets to be the chauffeur tonight at midnight, picking them up from the airport. So I'm glad that you're the brother and not me, because at midnight I will be sound asleep as I get up at 4:30 in the morning every morning.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Very excited today. Steve said he's taken on a new role. He's joining our acquisitions team, and on top of his responsibilities with the storage syndicate, he's diving into the underwriting side of things. And so it actually worked out perfectly. We were scheduled tonight. I like every once in a while to go into the nuts and bolts with you guys and really get into the weeds of what it is that makes a developer. At the end of the day, a developer is somebody who is really looking into the future and examining data in the present to try and determine what an outcome is going to look like in the case of self-storage 3, 4, 5 years down the road, right? To give you guys a quick overview of the timeline of some of these deals, we will put a piece of land under contract that we've already done some basic underwriting, right? We've checked the rates with Radius Plus. We've dug into the zoning with the municipality to make sure that we have a clear path to getting self-storage built there. We've done so, we understand the demographics of the town, the amount of self-storage that's existing, what are the rates that we can expect in a general sense. Once we put that property under contract, we are anywhere from 6 months to a year to being able to close on the actual property. And we could be another 6 months to a year to breaking ground on an actual construction project. So from the time we put a piece of property under contract to when we break ground, it is very easy for that to be a 2-year process for us to get all the I's dotted, T's crossed, right? There is a whole bunch, and we'll go through that process actually. If you guys missed it, a week ago, Joe and I did a live presentation for our fund where we went through all the different due diligence steps that we take before and after we sign a contract on a piece of land, right? There's pieces we do before even signing the contract, and then there's a bunch that we do. And guys, this is hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? We're spending $100,000 before we close on the land. And then getting permits involves getting architectural drawings, civil drawings, the MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. All of those are hundreds of thousands of dollars of architectural fees and engineering fees, not to mention the cost of the permits that we have to pull, which usually is a percentage of the total projected cost of the project. We're talking about, Steve, we're talking about projects that are $13 to $19 million to build. So a percentage adds up very quickly, right? If you have 1% of a $13 million project, you're talking about $130,000 permit cost. So just to give you guys a little background, the timeline can be can be 2 years to get the thing to construction. Construction usually about a year, anywhere from 11 to 13 months, depending on the where you're at. Is winter affecting it? What style of build are you building? And then we have our lease up phase, which in pre-COVID, as we were going into COVID and then early COVID, we were seeing unbelievable lease ups. I was hearing stories of new facilities that were leasing up in 12 to 16 months, which is unheard of. We now, as we're coming out of COVID, and of course with the interest rate rising, a little bit of a recession, you might say, based strictly on numbers, it was absolutely a recession, but we're seeing now more traditional lease up periods where it's, anywhere from 30 to 36 months to get to full economic occupancy. You understand Physical occupancy means you have 85 to 90% of your units rented. That would be considered physical stabilized occupancy. But when you start leasing up one of these facilities, you are not renting your units at the highest price for the market. You're typically giving a discount on your rental rate to drive faster lease up. And then it's going to take a little while to then get that rate up to what would be considered economic stabilization, right? So this can be a 3, 4, 5 year process to get one of these facilities. So what is a developer? A developer is someone who looks at a bunch of data right now and makes a determination about what they think that's going to look like 3, 4, 5 years from now when this thing gets to full economic occupancy. And so one of the things we want to look at, and one of the critical tools in our process, is what's called a third-party feasibility study. We have a ninja in the space that we use, cutting edge. Steve Ross is his name. He was actually a store manager for Extra Space in the early 1980s, lived on site on an Extra Space facility in Utah where Extra Space is headquartered, and worked his way up through the company to the point that he was a vice president for them in the early 90s. And they decided to do in-house feasibility studies, right? Feasibility study is a requirement of the bank. Steve is very unique in this space. And not only does he do a demographic feasibility study, but he also does an economic pro forma associated with it, which is very helpful for us to determine what's going to be the build cost of this. What's the equity build going to look like, right? What kind of multiplier are we going to create? Is it going to cost us $15 million to build? Are we going to have a 1.5 multiple? Is it going to be worth $22.5 million? Are we going to have a multiple of 2? Is it going to be worth $30 million, right? Is it going to be worth twice as much as what it cost us to build? So what I wanted to do tonight on the spotlight, and guys, if you're listening, I say guys, women, Jessica Johnson, who's always out there, I do her disservice by saying guys, because she's like our number one chime in person, always giving some great insight in the chat. Feel free to comment and ask questions. I am going to go through with you a feasibility that we have on a project that's going to break ground here in the very near future. It's in Pearland, Texas. I always pronounce that right. Well, I was talking to a guy from Texas earlier today, and I said Pearland, and he totally pronounced it differently. He didn't call me on it, but it's like Pearland. I don't know how to pronounce it right. For those of you in Texas, if somebody wants to put the proper, dictionary pronunciation of Pearland, Texas, please do. Pearland is a major suburb of Houston. He actually described it as kind of like the Fort Worth. If you take Fort Worth to Dallas, Pearland is kind of like the Fort Worth of Houston. It's a major metro right next to Houston, massively growing population. So we're going to dig in to the feasibility and kind of see how we're going to use the feasibility to make some determinations about what we think is going to happen down the road. So without further ado, I am going to hit the present button at the bottom of my screen, and I'm going to, I know there's a tab. I can't share that. I want to go window. That's what I want. I found it, Steve. I found it. I'm proud of myself.
Yeah, what's interesting with the feasibility, I mean, I talk to people every single day, and what I'm learning, obviously, I know our system, we're taking these orders, or we're getting a study prior to closing the land, like you said. But I see people go the other way around, and I don't understand how that's a benefit, where they're buying the land off the, never getting a feasibility report. And that's kind of like their second or third thing down the line. So I'm really kind of curious through this.
And two schools. There's two schools there, Steve, and I'll be quite frank. There are some very seasoned self-storage developers who I talk to every day, very close friends with a bunch of people in the industry who are fully capable of doing a lot of the research that Steve Ross does for us on their own. And they don't mind doing it, right? In Legacy, we are huge proponents of who, not how. We don't want to do everything in-house. We have a very small team, right? We have a total of 8 people in our office working for Legacy. And wherever we can, if we can find somebody else that enjoys doing something that we need to do, that nobody in our current staff is particularly A, suited to, or B, wants to do it, right? It's a big part of life, is like, you got to do the things that give you passion, that make you excited, right? That's why I like getting on here on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. I like educating. I like talking. Everyone knows I like talking, but we don't force our employees to go do something that's not fun and exciting for them. So we have this resource with Steve Ross. There are those developers out there who are capable of doing that data search themselves. And so they do it in-house, and they're very seasoned and they know exactly what they're doing. The flip side of that, what we've seen in self-storage in the last 5 or 6 years, is there are some new operators who jumped in the space who are doing things sort of shotgun approach. And we've already started to see it a little bit where you're seeing, we go through it every day, and you're going to see this firsthand as you're really digging into the acquisition side of things and helping with underwriting new deals. We'll look at markets where there's 30, 40, 50 square feet of storage per capita in a market. To put that in context for the people watching, the national average is 6.1 square feet of storage per person. There is 6.1 square feet of storage for the average American. Now, if we go into a market, a 3-mile radius, and there's 50 square feet, imagine what that's going to do in a supply and demand aspect. There's so much storage, you have no hope to have strong rates in that market in most cases. And all you can say there, Steve, is that somebody who was a newer developer went into that market, didn't do the research to understand what already existed for supply, and built something anyway. And we are seeing that for sure. Legacy is very careful, not to make that mistake. Of course, we don't necessarily know who's going to buy the land a mile down the road every time we buy a piece of property. So there's always that risk that somebody else comes into the pipeline after you've already made the purchase of the land. But that's part of our due diligence too, is we're checking that pipeline. We're communicating with the municipality all the way through to make sure. So we want to protect ourselves as much as possible. Make sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
All right, so I've been showing this feasibility screen for a while. I want to dig through this. This is a wonderful thing. If you get a feasibility study, the first 3 or 4 of these that I read through from cover to cover. As you start to get better, you understand it, there's going to be some certain parts that you're going to jump to. Now, Steve always sums everything up in section 2. Section 1 is exactly the same. It said the same thing on every single one of these I've gotten. So don't ever need to read section 1 again, but it gives a good overview of self-storage as an industry. 2 is his conclusions relative to the particular site that we're looking at. Competition, he's going to do a thorough overview of what it is we're facing in the market. Now, we will have already started to understand who our competitors are in that market before we ever even make an offer on the site. But Steve's going to do an even deeper analysis where he'll call every single one of those facilities multiple times, and he'll start to establish what it is that their occupancy looks like. And he'll do that by asking them, hey, how many of these units do you have available if I needed one of these? How many of these units do you have available if I need one of these? Where are they located on the site? And he'll establish a number that he thinks their occupancy is at. And of course, the higher the occupancy, the less likely that someone's going to go to them. If we build a new facility, right, if they're at 95% occupancy, they just don't have a lot of units for rent. Somebody's much more likely to come to us. He's going to find out in detail what their pricing looks like, so we can have a guide of what we might be able to assume for rents when we open our facility. And then he's going to get detailed pictures of the site. Are they going to be a competitor from the standpoint of, we're going to build a brand new Class A, beautiful looking facility. It's going to look like a retail center type store. If this is a dated, rundown facility, we know that we have a really strong chance to draw the consumer to us instead of them. What are the demand numbers, right? We talked about that national average for self-storage. That number changes from state to state. There are certain states with much higher demand than others. A lot of the southern states where they build houses a lot on slabs, there isn't so much basements. There's not as much storage space within houses. A lot of places in the South now, there's a lot of new developments that are HOAs where you're not allowed to store certain things on site. You can't have a camper or a RV or a boat on your house. And so that increases the demand for storage for people. And we're going to examine that. I'll go through this section.
I've even seen that where new developments going in where they're putting in
Don't have a garage.
The electric chargers, and they don't let you put anything that's flammable inside your garage.
100%. So all those factors are starting to really drive the need for self-storage. Now, know that number is simply, we don't know exactly what the demand cap is, Steve, right? All 6.1 is taking the total square feet of storage in the country and dividing it by the population. It's a total arbitrary number based on how much storage exists now versus how many people there are. That's it. Mm-hmm. Now, we could very well get to a place where there's 12 square foot per person and we still have strong rates. We don't know. And we'll only find that out if we actually build that much self-storage. Ironically, in the last year, the actual square foot per capita decreased. So it went down by 0.1. The population increased faster than self-storage did in 2022. So that number actually dropped, while rates actually dropped a little bit too over the last year. As interest rates spiked, we did see a little bit of a easing on the record rates that we saw during COVID. Still very strong and above pre-COVID numbers. So we'll get into that as we go through this feasibility. Project cost. Steve is going to give an estimate on what he thinks based on recent information that he's amassed, because he's dealing with a bunch of different developers, what it's going to cost us to build the thing. And then he's going to give a 5-year pro forma. As I said, he's going to map out what he thinks the entrepreneurial profit from this project is going to look like. And then he's going to do projections. What's it going to look like month by month as far as a budget? Your expenses, your profits, how's that going to break down as you're leasing up this facility? And then finally, he's going to do an in-depth demographic study. So I'm going to skip through here, and I'm going to go past the conclusions, because we're going to talk about each individual. You know what? I won't go past the conclusions. I was going to, but I'm not going to. I'm going to actually go through quickly through. So you can see Steve says this is going to be 90,575 square feet of self-storage plus 5 office spaces, right? 90,575 is actually the net rentable amount of storage here. So the proposed facility managed in traditional manner and reach stabilization. He expects it to take 32 months from opening to get to 85 to 90% occupancy. Ideally, a self-storage development will reach a minimum debt service coverage ratio. Guys, that means the amount of money it makes as a ratio to the cost of the debt, right? So 1.3 would mean it's 30% more profitable than what it costs to pay the debt on the facility, right? So he's expecting that this will reach a debt coverage ratio of 1.65 by the end of year 3. In other words, it's making 65% more money every year than it costs to service the debt on the total bill to build the thing. That is a fantastic DSCR. That's the abbreviation for debt service coverage ratio. So self-storage developments facing 2 challenges. This actually feasibility was done at the very beginning of the increase in the interest rate. So I would say there are now 3 challenges facing self-storage. Construction costs went up, right? No doubt about it. We used to be able to build a single-story climate control or single-story mix, climate control and non-climate control, for $80 a square foot, and a multi-story for $100 a square foot. That's now $100 and $120. So about $20 a square foot over the last few years. That construction costs have risen as COVID really, we've seen it across the board. We've seen inflation hit everything. The second part is property taxes, right? This is something that we're particularly attuned to in Texas, where they don't have state income tax. They make up a lot of the burden of their lack of state income tax with property taxes, right? It's not like you're not getting taxed. You just get taxed in a different way. And so we have to pay very close attention to what the municipalities are going to value our property at once we're done building it. So 3 things that we're facing a little bit. 1 would be interest rates right now. The cost of debt has gone up. 2 would be the cost of construction. And 3, of course, we want to pay attention to what our property taxes are going to look like. For you guys that haven't been in self-storage for long, property taxes are typically the number one most expensive part of your net operating expenses. So, quick summation for him, the facilities in the area that we're going to compete with are all exceeding 94% occupancy. 93% is considered full. There is about 7% turnover per month on average in a storage facility. So if you're at 93% occupancy, you're pretty much full, accounting for the average monthly turnover that happens in a storage facility. So this is a really strong occupancy number. Lends us to feel like we're going to have a nice lease up in this facility. No additional storage planned in the 3 Mile. And in fact, in the city of Pearland, we feel very confident based on our interaction. We had to go through what's called a CUP approval process, conditional use permit. We passed that CUP by a 4-3 vote for their planning board. And we're pretty much told in no uncertain terms, don't bother coming back for another site, because it really felt like they don't want any more self-storage in the market. So we feel pretty protected on that side. Like, it doesn't seem like there's going to be anyone else join the pipeline behind us. Steve does a market analysis based on the Texas average of self-storage per capita. It looks like there's a demand of 273,000 square feet, right? I'm scrolling back up. You can see we're building 90,000. So we're building less than half of what he considers the demand. Is actually really exciting about this project, Steve. We were forced to build a single building 3-story. They changed the rules on us mid-project, and we are not allowed to build single story self-storage on this site. We have to build 3 stories. What does that mean? Well, we have a 10-acre site here. When we lease this facility up, we're going to be able to go build a whole new building. We don't need to get CUP approval to build another building. We already have the approval to build self-storage on the site. We would just have to go get building permits, right? But we have the ability to go build a whole nother 100,000 square foot net rentable on this site. And wow. So that's very exciting in this municipality for this particular project. So that's a quick summation of what Steve, he goes in this much more in depth, but that's a pretty good summation of his feelings on the project. So I'm going to skip now from section 2 to section 3, which is the competition and market information. So he's going to break down. This is actually always where I go to first. When I first get into a feasibility, he goes in what determines the class of storage. We always are building class A. Class D or lower is not considered competition. Class A, very briefly, 65,000 would be a minimum square feet. We said this one's 90,000, and it's going to look like a retail space. It's going to look like a modern facility that you want to go into, right? It's not going to look like the old style Citadel. It looks like a castle with moats and walls and scary to look at. It's going to attract the customer. So that's what we're building 100% of the time. So he's broken down here, and you can see on this page, proposed is us. And then he's got all the other facilities that are in that trade radius that we are expected to compete with. And he's going to break them down. So the first line I'm going to look at is where it says approximate current occupancy. And we've got 96, 94, 97, 97, 94, and 97. They're all, except for one, relatively decent sized facilities, right? They're all around almost, around 100,000 square feet. There's a word escaping my brain right now. What do you call it when you adjust to the nearest number? I don't know how I'm not remembering this word. Round. If you rounded, they're all near 100,000 square feet. I don't know how I forgot that word at 7:20 on a Wednesday night, but I did. So that's the first thing I'm looking at, right? Then I'm going to look, because we're building 100% climate control in this facility, I'm going to look at my competition. Is there climate control in the market? All of these facilities, except for the really small one, have climate control. So we're not the only people with climate control, but because they're so fully occupied, I still am confident that my climate control is going to rent up. The next thing I'm looking at is their class. B+, C, A-, B plus, A minus, A minus. They're all relatively high class facilities. So,
would you
I
know?
don't have a, go ahead.
Do you know what's a B plus versus an A minus? I mean, is that kind of a subjective type grading, or
It's certainly subjective, and there's a few different things that are going to be built into that. One of them is total size. One of them is there's essentially been 5 phases of self-storage design. We're in what would be considered a 5th generation of how storage is built, right? If you think of those multi-story facilities with glass windows on the 2nd and 3rd floor so you can see a few of the roll-up doors interior, it looks like a shopping center. That would be considered a 5th generation style build. Even in a single story facility, you're going to see kind of that, like, it's very open. Yes, there's gates and there's fencing, but you can see into the facility and it looks like a pleasant place to be. There's a bunch of security cameras. It's very well lit. The place looks like it's a modern facility, and it's big. It's 65, 70,000 net rentable square feet. The other piece of that typically gets factored in when people go to determine the class is what's the profit that it's making per square foot, right? What's the net operating income that it's getting per square foot? And usually if it's got double digit per square foot, if it's making about $10 a square foot in net operating income, that would make it be considered a class A. Now I'm going to go through these. You'll see in a second. I'll go through all these facilities, and you can just see from some pictures that even the ones that are A minus, you might question, are they really an A minus? Are they really going to be a competitor with us? And I'll get into that. Those are really the things I'm going to look at. I'm going to look at approximate current occupancy. Is there climate control in the market? And what is the grade of that facility? Okay. And once I've seen those things, then I have a pretty good idea of, what is this thing looking like? Now, this is the piece of land that we're going to build on. And Steve has gone through and he's got 8 different metrics: visibility, traffic count, management, demographics, right? How many people are in the community and what is their median income? That would be demographics. What's the security going to be like? What's the accessibility on the site? What's the curb appeal look like? And then what's the class grade? Now, this accessibility is a 5 because it's a right in, right out facility. You cannot take a left turn into this facility. So he automatically downgrades that. If you upgraded this number, to an 8, this would be a 9 facility instead of an 8.5. So, I mean, everything but the accessibility is very high on this rating. So now if I go down and I look at my competition, you can see the CubeSmart down the street, and he's rated that. This would be a 7.75. He's given this a B plus rating, but you can see just from the exterior picture, it's a little bit of a dated facility, right? It's not as new looking as our facility is going to be. Still nice. Still would be some competition. Not that worried about it. Why? Because it was at 97% occupancy. This guy is definitely not going to be my competition in any way, shape, or form. So I'm not even worried about him. And again, he was fully occupied. This is a life storage. This one gets a deduction just because the picture was taken on a cloudy day, so it looks miserable just to begin with. But again, you can see just by the way the driveway looks, right? You can see that it's a little bit of an older facility, just a little bit run down based on just looking at the driveway and nothing else. Is it going to be my competition? Absolutely. Am I going to be able to charge 30, 40% more than this facility is? No, I'm not going to be able to. But he's full, so I'm not that worried about it. Another CubeSmart, nice looking facility. Again, a little dated. You can see the signs kind of worn out, right? I would imagine CubeSmart already. Guy Middlebrooks, if you're watching this, get your guys on this and get this sign replaced, because that is hard to see, right? He got a 2-point deduction on visibility just because of the sign looking washed out. So I'm going to go through this. This is an iStorage, and this was, again, at 8.125. Steve's rating this as a Class A facility. And you can see it looks like Class A. They've got some exterior drive-up, even on a multi-story building. You can see an overhang over the main entrance. I mean, this is a nice-looking facility. It's going to have a mix of climate control. I think these exterior drive-ups may still be climate control, or they might be non-climate control, depending on how they decided to build this. This is a really nice competitor. Again, he's full, so I'm not that worried about it. Nice looking extra space. This is kind of funny. We know extra space's colors are green and white. This facility looks like it was built to be a CubeSmart or some other brand. There's a bunch of brands in the industry that have red as a primary color. Extra Space is not one of them. So they must have bought this post-purchase and haven't gotten around to repaying it yet. Another nice looking facility though. So what do we know, man? We know that in this market, there's some really nice looking Class A facilities. And in fact, I would say of all the 9 that we've done ourselves and the 3 others with JV partners on, Steve, this is probably the market with the highest level of competition, right? So I'm going to ask you a question, and maybe you can give a little conjecture here. Why would we go into this market anyway, knowing that there's this level of competition and it looks pretty strong from a competition standpoint?
I mean, from the outside, kind of looking in, I feel like, well, first off, they're all full, so I like that. And
I'm going to come off. I shut this
that's
for a
a
second.
nice.
Give me 1 second, Steve. They're all full. That's a really good. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for 1 second so we can talk. There we go. Go ahead. So that was a really good one. One of the things is they're all full, and that's one reason that we still would go into a market like this, even with what looks like significant competition.
Yeah, and there's demand, right? There's still a need there for storage. So like, yeah, I mean, it's, if your competition can't take anybody, that's just opens up the door for you. And it looks like people are choosing they like that look, that draw. They want that security. They want that nice image. It brings the eyes to it, makes you want to go in there and put your stuff in storage there, which, we're going to build something that looks better. So I think that gives a good opportunity for it.
One very good reason. If those facilities weren't completely full, then we would have run away from this market. There's a couple more reasons, and I'm going to get into those now. I'm going to go in.
Yeah, that's interesting. Look at that numbers. I'm saying, wow, powerhouse. But again, 97, 94, 97, 97, 94. That's
for sure. So the next page we're going to go to here is going to be a comparison of, I somehow ended up going backwards in this feasibility when I took my screen off. Here we get to an important piece of this, right? And he's going to go in and he's going to break down all the rates that we think we're going to get based on what's going on in the other facilities, right? So as we look through this is going to be really important in determining what do we think we're going to make for economic, when we rent a facility, what are we going to get as a price per square foot out of this? And so you can see we've got the B plus and the A minus and the A minus and the A minus. And we're going to come down and we're going to use 10 by 10 and temperature control, right? We said all of our facility is going to be temperature control. You can see all the different unit sizes. And we've got kind of a funky mix of unit sizes just because of the layout of the facility. Oh, no, I lied. We don't. The competition does. Like, you don't usually see a 5 by 8. You don't usually see an 8 by 12, but this extra space has got some really funky configurations going on. So anyway, we're going to skip to the 10 by 10 because it's it's 100 square feet. So it's very easy math. And we get $194 a month on 100 square feet. That's $1,940 in 10 months. Add 2 more months at $388, and you've got a little over almost $2,300 for the year, maybe a little over $2,300. $2,300 is $23 a square foot per year. That's a really nice return for us in self-storage, right? That's kind of a number where we feel confident that we're going to be able to make a project pencil. So he's going down, and what he's done is he called all these competing facilities, and he's got an idea of what they're charging for a 10 by 10 climate controlled unit. And you can see the one nearest competitor is the CubeSmart right down the street. This is actually literally, it's 1525 Main Street, and ours is 1325 Main Street. So very close. And they're getting between $167 and $250 for a climate controlled unit. You want to tell me why the gap might be this big, Steve?
I was going to ask you, but I'm just wondering if it has to do with the location or the demand. I mean, are those the people who are renting later in the fill up? paying 250
This
because
is everything about where is the unit in the facility,
yeah.
right? Is it, 10 feet from the main office, or is it up an elevator on the third floor all the way in the far back, as far away from the elevator as you can get? Now, we're going to try and design this so the elevator is in the center of the building, and we're going to put a drive-up entrance near the center of the building where it's easy to get access to the elevator, but you're still going to have a little bit of a rate difference based on where in the facility the unit that you're renting is. So this is a pretty big gap. This is one of the bigger ones I've ever seen. But at $167 a square foot, for a 10 by 10 per month, that equals out to $2,000 a year. Now, before interest rates went haywire and construction costs went haywire, $20 a square foot was an absolutely killer rate for us. If we were getting $167 a month, we were very excited about that. Now, with rates the way they are currently, that's a little bit of not as rosy of an outlook. But this goes back to what we were talking about before, is what we're really trying to do is determine what's going to happen 5 years from now. If something is trading at $167 in 2023, this actually feasibility was done in 2022. What can we reasonably expect in 2026? Is it fair for us to assume that the inflation we've seen hit us in construction costs that hasn't yet fully carried over to the cost of storage units is going to hit storage units by the time we get to that place? We like to think yes. We certainly like to believe that there's no reason to think that rates are going to go significantly backwards, right? And I'll get into some of the reasons we think that as we go deeper through the feasibility study, even though I only got 8 minutes left. So I'm going to have to start talking faster. We expect Steve, this is Steve, I say we, this is third party. Steve has no affiliation with us at all. He expects a 10 by 10 to rent for $194 a month. That is a very good price. This is at opening, by the way. This is the number he expects the day we open the doors, which he projected to be about 18 months from when he did this feasibility study. Demand. He's thinking we're going to draw from a 3-mile radius. There's 71,000 people in that 3-mile radius. This number 6.2, I told you, actually dropped to 6.1 this year. Texas is 8.31 though. That's the average storage per person in Texas. If we use 8.31 and we take all of the existing square footage, there's 498,000 square feet. Now, Steve does a Venn diagram model. So he takes how much of that population, the particular facility, how much of their 3-mile radius is within the market, right? And then he does that math. So he comes up with 273,000 square feet of demand. Even if he didn't do that, you're still talking about well over 100,000 square feet of demand. And we're only building, as I said, 90,000 in this facility. So the demand study, there is very strong demand here. I'm going to get in further. I already talked to you about the fact that we don't think there'll be any more storage coming into this market. And you're going to see as we get deeper into this why that picture looks even better. Here's Steve's breakdown of what percentage of the facility is going to be what kind of units and what he thinks we're going to get for a rate. Remember, we said 20 used to be really, really good, still is okay for us. He expects when this facility opens that we'll be renting units at $22 a square foot. That is a fantastic number for us as a starting point for this facility. Now he breaks down the construction cost. What's it going to cost us to build this thing all in, right? So we'll skip right down to the bottom here. Our land cost, we bought this almost 11 acres for just over $2 million. Holding fees, that's what it's going to cost us in bank debt to pay our construction loan. $12,519,000 is our total expected cost to build. Total expected project cost with closing, a little over $16 million. What do you think, Steve? You got that hanging around?
I wish.
So now we're going to go to our 5-year valuation and entrepreneurial profit. So $16 million sounds like a lot of money until you start looking at what a facility is going to be worth when you're all said and done. So Steve is projecting at year 3, when this facility gets fully leased up, that it is going to be generating $2.277 million of revenue a year. He's expecting expenses to run at almost $800,000. I don't know what that is as a percentage, but it's somewhere right around 35%, I think. If you were to run a quick calculator on it, I'm going to do a calculator on it because I like doing that. Just to give you guys, typically in self-storage, we're somewhere from 25 to 30% expenses. So for us, it's a good thing to do a quick math to see where Steve is calculating, to see if he's being conservative. Yeah, it was right at, it's 0.348%. So he was right at 35%, which is pretty conservative relative to what's industry standard, which a lot of times is 30% or below. So he's built a little conservatism into his net operating income. At 1.483872, at a 5 cap, it's expected to be worth $29 million, a little over $29 million. Now, with what's happened with interest rates in the last year, we are being a little more conservative in our valuation. We would say more likely to underwrite to a 5.5 cap. Some people I know are using a 6 cap. So this becomes the question. If we're all into this thing for $16 million and it's going to be worth anywhere from $25 to $27 million, is that a viable project for us to build? If we can create, rough math, $8, $9, $10 million of equity in a facility on a $16 million build, is that something that's worth building? This is my chance for you to talk, Steve. I don't stop for 2 seconds very often.
Looking at that, I was looking at that 5%. That looks conservative too, right? Those rate increases, 5%, isn't it typically higher than that in a year?
So this is typically it's been 8 over the last 40 years.
Okay. Yeah.
However, we saw such a marked increase during the 2.5 years after COVID hit that you're not going to keep that. Just to give you guys an example, the industry saw a 61% increase in 2.5 years. That's the value of the REITs, right? Public Storage, Life Storage, Extra Space, NSA REIT, and CubeSmart, the big publicly traded companies, their value went up by 60%. So 5% is conservative, but I think for the next 3 or 4 years, probably not a bad thing to be conservative in. But yes, again, a little bit of conservatism built into based on historical, right? 40 years, 8%. This is modeling at 5. That was a very good catch, Steve. Okay.
Yeah, and to answer your question, hell yeah, we'll take a $10 million equity on a project still. Yeah,
for sure. So just to give the people watching a little context, in 2022, the average Class A facility that sold at a 4.6 cap. So at a 4.6 cap, this valuation would actually be in the low 30 million range. So really, really strong sales market for storage. We expect that as we go into late 2023 into 2024, there's going to be some softening in that, which is why we land at a 5.5 cap. Probably this facility at stabilization, if we were to underwrite it today, if it was making this NOI today, would be worth about $27 million. But remember what we said at the beginning, Steve, what's our real job here as developers? We're trying to Nostradamus, right? We're trying to look forward.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Our interest rate's going to still be at 6% on a refi in 5 years from now, at 9% on a construction loan 4 or 5 years. No, they're not. They're going to come back down over time. Highly likely. Is it possible they stay there? Yes. Is it likely? No. We haven't seen interest rates that high since the early 1990s. So literally it's been 30 years. So I want to get through the rest of this, guys. I got 1 minute. Entrepreneurial profit. Steve Ross based this off of the 5 cap valuation. Very likely to think that if we were going to sell this thing, that we could sell it at a 5 cap. $13.5 million would be the profit on a sale, right? A little bit less than that, Steve, just so you know, for us and our model, we raise money for the equity piece of it, for what the bank's not going to cover. We don't bring $4 million of our own money to the table. We go raise that from investors. So we're going to have to pay some debt on that as well. figure another $1.5 million to $2 million. Still, you're looking at $11.5 to $12 million of profit if you were to sell it. Even at a 5.5 cap, you're looking at $7.5, $8 million of profit that you would have in this facility. If I said you could build something for 16 and you could then sell it and make 8 million in 5 years, would that be worthwhile?
Yeah.
Okay, I agree. Projections, I don't look at this too closely. This is breaking down all the numbers that I just went over month by month. There are times we're going to dig into the weeds here, and there's some pieces of it that certainly, if you're building a facility, you're going to want to look at. Particularly, Steve is communicating with the municipality to get an idea of what real estate taxes are going to look like, right? You could see $40,000 a month, right? This is not a small expense in the grand scheme. $482,000 a year is what his projection is. Just so you know, Steve calls the municipality and then raises what they tell him it's likely to be by 30%. So he builds some conservatism in here too, right? I want to go to this last page, though, the last piece, which is demand. Demographics, big piece of it for us in Pearland, right? And I'm going to go right to population. This is the 3-mile radius. In 1990, there were 30,000 people. In 2000, there were 38,000 people. In 2010, there were 60,000 people. And in 2021, there was 72,000 people. The growth rate in this 3-mile circle is absurd. It is growing extremely rapidly. So even though we know we have current high demand, we also have incredible population growth to back that demand. And there is no reason to think, if anyone saw a recent map, Texas had 353,000 new people move into the state in 2022. So absolutely gung-ho about the long-term growth prospects over the next 3, 4, 5 years for this community, Pearland. If you dig further, I'm not going to, because we've gone over our typical allotted time. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We will, of course, come back to do something similar to this someday in the future. But if we were to dig into the median income in Pearland is almost 50% higher than the national average. So not only hugely growing population, already existing demand, all the competitors full, strong rates. We expect $22 a square foot as of today, not accounting for how inflation might affect that over the next 3 or 4 years. All the metrics of this deal, extremely exciting for us as investors, excited to get it out of the ground. And as I said, as we build this facility, the first building, get it leased up in 2027, 2028, we have the ability to go back and build another one and really double the net operating income, right? So let's say it costs us another $15, $16 million to build the second building, but now all of a sudden the total facility is worth $55, $60 million. It becomes an absolute home run of a project. So excited about that. Looking forward to getting that breaking ground. Appreciate you guys for watching. As always, any questions, don't be afraid to leave a comment here. We're always looking, whether you're watching on LinkedIn, Facebook. Really, really thankful for you guys following us. We get so much good feedback and really appreciate you guys for the love and support we get for doing the Storage Syndicate Spotlight. We will be back next Wednesday. Steve, as always, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being such a trooper. For those of you who don't know Steve is like the greatest guy to be around. He is the most uplifting and positive person you could know. And very thankful that he comes with me on this every Wednesday. Keeps me upbeat and positive. Appreciate you being here. And I look forward to seeing everybody next Wednesday night, 7 o'clock.
Awesome. Appreciate it, brother. Thank you. This was great. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching.